Okay, quick check to make sure our audio is working. All right, perfect. Okay. Hello and welcome to the class. Today is Wednesday, January 20th. I'm sorry that we weren't able to meet on Monday. It was, of course, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and so it was a holiday. My apologies for not realizing that earlier, and letting you guys know, last week. I didn't know myself until just minutes before. I'd forgotten completely until just moments before I let you guys know. So today's lesson might be a little bit dry. I don't know. It's something that I think is important to go over, which is the rubric. I know that I included a breakdown of it in our shared Blackboard folder. The thing is that one of the chief questions that I get with regards to the class is people not understanding how our grade conversions work, people not understanding how the rubric works. So I like to dedicate a class to really breaking down the minutia of it, and then we're also going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the rubric. We're going to talk about the grade conversions, and then I'm also going to speak a little bit about the monologue activity that you guys have to do for this week. So if you take a look at the supplemental information packet, which is linked in the syllabus, there is the rubric that we use in this class is located in that supplemental information packet. It's accessible through the syllabus. It's accessible through the UAF Cojo website. That is a handwritten form of the rubric. What I did when I first got to UAF, because I wanted to convert to a green classroom, is I digitized it. And I sort of made it easier to work within a digital format. Every year I've just been sort of like shaping it down, making it like as easy as possible for me to, again, because I have a lot of students, I'm trying to make it easy as not as easy, but as easy, as fast for myself as possible to get through students' grades so that I can get them out to you in as expeditious a manner as possible. Now, the nice thing about this class is that the grading isn't particularly difficult for a couple of reasons that we'll get into. One is that I've been doing this for 5 years now, and so I've seen a lot of speeches, and I can... whereas earlier, it really took me a long time to be like, okay, did this person get this criteria? Did this person get this criteria? Now, while I'm watching and listening, I can go through and do it rather quickly as a benefit of my experience. But what we're going to talk about today is a breakdown of the rubric. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, like I said, there is a video on the Blackboard that shows you guys how to do things. And really says everything that I'm going to say with regards to the rubric. But I do want to go over it just because it's nice for me to sort of like let you know what my thought process is when I grade. So our rubric is broken down into 8 competencies. Now, this is a rubric that was designed after, I guess in the 1960s or 1970s, educators came together and compiled a huge list of data about public speaking classes and determined the best criteria for evaluating a speech. These are the criteria they came up with. Now, before we get into the criteria themselves, I want to talk about the grading schema, the system that we use, all the public speaking instructors at UAF use in order to grade you, because it's got a couple of quirks. The first thing, and I mentioned this last time when I was going over the syllabus, is that no matter what, if you get up and give me just like a blurb about, just tell me your name and what your speech is about, then I have to give you a 60, right? The minimum that I can give you is a passing grade. It's a crappy grade, but that's the minimum that I can give you. And so if you get up, you tell me what your name is, what your speech topic is, I'll give you that grade of 60. If you don't even have a speech topic, that doesn't count. All right. I need you to at least, and even if you come up with something on the fly, like I said last time, please don't not turn anything in. Make sure that you turn something in, just your name and a speech and what your speech topic was going to be about, and that's it. I'll give you that 60. If you just get up and tell me your name, or if you just get up and you're like, huh, then I'm just going to give you the 0. All right. And I think that's fair. The other thing to understand is that each of these competencies that we're going to talk about, a competency is like a category, all right? So each of these competencies is graded out of a score of 5. There are 8 competencies to give you a total score out of 40. Now, the way that this thing is graded, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but the way that this thing is graded is on a logarithmic scale. What a logarithmic scale means is that it's not going to be like any other rubric you've ever really experienced before, because 8 out of 40 is a 60%. So if you get a 20 out of 40, I don't want to get any emails that are like, I got an email once that was like, I think a 50% is really harsh because I think I did a pretty good job on my speech. A 20 out of 40 is something, I've actually got the conversion right here. A 20 out of 40 is a C, all right? So if you give me a pretty decent speech, you didn't do that great on it, but you didn't, horribly mess it up. A 20 out of 40 is not a bad grade. Again, it's not a great grade, but it's not an awful grade. Now, to show you how weird the scale is, 8 out of 40 is a D, 20 out of 40 is a C, and 33 out of 40 is an A. So the scale like compresses and releases in very odd ways, because between like the 12 points between 8 and 20 is only 1 letter grade, but the 13 points between 20 and 33 is 2 letter grades. So you're going from D to C in 12 points, but then at 13 points you're going through C, B, and A. All right, so it's the grading scale is a little odd for this thing, but the way that it's designed is to give you guys a little bit of a break, so that you can miss 7 points on the speech and still get an A. All right, it's sort of designed with that in mind. All right, so it sort of wants to put everybody. Modern academia is designed to sort of squish everybody down into the average, all right, into like the middle of the bell curve. I don't want you guys to be at the middle of the bell curve, all right? This is an easy class. It's really not that difficult to escape this class with an A. Really, and I'm an easygoing guy. I'm a pretty easy grader. Really, if you come out of this class with a poor grade, it's your own fault. The reason for that is that I, to be honest with you, could not care less about grades. What makes me happy is when students really put a lot of effort into their speeches. So as I was going over the introduction videos and I was going over the introductory posts and the forums, what I really like is people that put in effort. All right, that's really what I care about. And for the most part, again, everything sort of falls into a bell curve. You're going to get the people that don't give a crap. You're going to get the people that go above and beyond. And then you're going to get the people that are going to take the class seriously. They're going to do the work that they need to do, and they're going to be done. And that's fine. All right, that makes me that I'm more than happy if you at least put the effort that I expect of you in this class. Okay, but all that aside. We'll get into the conversions in a little bit. I'll show you how the graph is a little bit wonky, or how the scale is a little bit wonky, but it's fine. All right. So the first competency talks about assignment specifics. All right. And once again, if you want to follow along, if this is hard for you to see, if you want to follow along, it's available in the supplemental information packet. And it's also available on Blackboard and all that sort of thing. But if you just want to follow along on the video, that's totally fine. So assignment specifics talks about your basics. In a general sense, did you meet the requirements of the assignment? If it looks like you prepared, if it looks like you practiced, you get the points for these things. All right. If you met the time requirement, the way that I calculate meeting the time requirement, by the way, and this will also sort of show you that a lot of the way that this rubric is scored is that if you missed out on, like if you didn't do a specific thing, it's going to hit you in multiple categories. So if you didn't meet the time requirement, for example, it's going to affect, did you prepare properly? Did you have enough material written down? All that sort of thing, which are in categories later on. So you'll see that you'll get dinged, for those things. All right. So met time requirement for our informative speeches. The time requirement is a minimum of 5 minutes. Okay, and what I give you is a leeway of 1 minute. All right. So if you give me a 4-minute speech, you're good. If you give me a 6-minute speech, you're good. All right. Anything less than that, anything more than that, then you don't get the points. All right. So 5 minutes is what we're aiming for. And you have 4 to 6 minutes. You have a window of 4 to 6 minutes to and you can be in that window and you'll get the points for that. All right. Met assignment specifics, not super relevant for 131 because all we're really doing is informative speeches. But if I ask you for an informative speech and you give me a 20-minute speech about how, it's wrong for people to wear the color red, then obviously that's not an informative speech. That's your opinion. You're not going to get the points for that. Okay. Moving on, your introduction here, competency 2, competency 3, competency 4. These start getting into the outline and the actual content of your speech, which we haven't gotten into. We're going to get into that next week. But basically, did you meet the criteria of the introduction? That's competency 2. If you've ever written an essay, then for an English class or for whatever it might be, then you're already going to be familiar with this. Did you have a hook, like an opener and attention getter? What is your thesis statement? A thesis statement is the crux, the essence of what your speech is about. So the way that I like to describe it is that your topic is very general, okay? And then the thesis is your take on that topic. So if the topic that I'm choosing is, let's say, the history of rock music, then a thesis would be, these are the 3 ways in which the Beatles influenced music today, all right? It's focused, it's not overly broad, and it's not overly focused, right? Remember, you have that 5-minute window. You can't give me something about how, I would discourage you from talking about something that's very, very technical, okay, or using a lot of jargon. Something like, this is how the Beatles influenced, music today. That's something that you can talk about. You can get main points. You can get 3 main points out of it. You can discuss them, and you can be done with your speech, and you got a good grade. All right? Relevance to audience. Why should the audience care? All right? And it's not like pretty much any topic you can make your audience care about. The relevance to audience is asking you to relate this subject to your audience. Think about it more as, why should your audience care? All right? You previewed your points. A lot of people get tripped up between the thesis and the point preview, okay? The thesis is, these are the ways that the Beatles influenced music today. The preview of points would be, they changed recording techniques, they changed the way we think about melodies, and they changed the way that lyrics are written. All right, that's your preview of points. It again goes into, if the topic is the most general level, the thesis is the next level. The preview of points is the level below that. All right, it further breaks down your thesis. Okay, and then transition into body. Transitions are the way that I like to describe transitions are. You're in Fairbanks. You want to get to Anchorage. You got to take the Parks Highway, or you got to take one of the highways that goes down into Anchorage. The transition is the Parks Highway. Okay, you're at point A. You want to get to point B. You have to take us logically the way that, because a lot of the times there's something in our mind and we understand it, and we forget that our audience doesn't understand it, or our audience is not in our heads with us, so they don't understand the logical leaps that we're making. Adequate transitioning, or good transitioning rather, takes the audience on your train of thought. Why did you bring up, for example, new recording techniques of the Beatles before you brought up, how they changed how we listen to melodies? Was it important? Was it not important? Did it not matter? There are different ways that you can organize. Sometimes it might not matter. If you're talking about your 3 favorite flavors of ice cream, unless they're ranked 1, 2, 3, if you sort of like strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate all the same, then it's not going to matter. All right, and you'll transition, and your transition will say that it doesn't really matter. Not in obviously those exact words, but you'll be like, now that we've spoken about chocolate ice cream, here's a flavor that I also like, strawberry. All right, you're not saying if it was ranked ordinally, like if you would rank them, you'd be like, that was my first favorite flavor, chocolate. Now strawberry is my second favorite flavor for so and so reason. All right, you're transitioning between you're taking us on that logical journey between your points A, B, and C, and whatever it might be. Okay. Third competency is for supporting material. This is when we're getting into the meat of your speech. Okay, this is where the body is going to be. And the reason for that is you've previewed your main points in the introduction. Now in the body, you're going to have 3 main points that are going to break down those points that you previewed for us in your introduction. You're not going to say that, we're going to talk about how the Beatles changed, how the Beatles developed new recording techniques, how they changed how we listen to melodies, and how they wrote amazing lyrics. And then you're going to start talking about why you love the Rolling Stones so much. No, your first main point is going to be about the recording techniques. Second main point is going to be about melodies. Third main point is going to be about lyrics. All right? Those have to link up. I know it's an obvious thing to say, but again, I've seen all sorts of things happen in speeches. Okay? Main points clear first criteria there is relevance of information. Information in the body supports main points and reinforces intended speech purposes. That's what I just said. Main points clear and elaborated. Again, this is one of those things where you might think that you're explaining yourself, but you're not explaining yourself as well as you might think you are, all right? Where people don't really understand what it is you're talking about. Because it's really easy, especially if you're not using effective transitions. For me, this is one of those things that happens all the time in speeches, is that I don't know what you're talking about, all right? So I don't know, I'm like, have we moved on from point A to point B? I have no idea, all right? And so you have to be really clear about when we've gotten to specific main points and when we've left the introduction and gotten into the body, when we've left the body, gone into the conclusion. And even between your main points and the body, you have to transition effectively, and you have to let us know when we're in that main point, all right? When we're in whether it's main point A, B, or C. Citations. In this new rubric that I'm developing, but I say new rubric, by the way, it's just an altered format for this exact same rubric. All the criteria are exactly the same. But I've condensed citations into just one category there. Citations, are your sources researched and are they referenced in your speech? I've just changed it to a general citations category, but they contain the same criteria. Did you look up your resources properly, or are you like, oh, old Billy Bob across the street told me so-and-so, and, that's why I think this is what it is. I had a student who once gave their speech. He had interviewed a World War II veteran, and he bolstered the interview with that World War II veteran, which is a primary source, against research that had been done on the battles that he was talking about, right? So that corroborates it. And you need stuff like that because something like somebody who's been in war, obviously it's a very personal experience, and you can contextualize that person's experiences by doing further research. So both the story and the secondary research help reinforce each other. Okay, both that person's interview and the secondary research. All right, and then did you reference it smoothly in your speech? Were you sort of fumbling over, forgot to reference, and then you were like, oh, actually, yeah, sorry, I know this because this guy told me that? Or are you like, according to this World War II veteran, X, Y, and Z, and this information is corroborated by research done at the University of Oxford, which found that, A, B, and C. Okay? That's a smooth way to reference your sources. You don't want to be all over the place with your speeches. And then effective use of visual aid if used. If you're doing a visual aid speech and you don't have a visual aid, then you're not going to get the points for this specific category or for this specific criteria. All right. Brendan, can I use myself as a source? It depends on what you're talking about. This is also one of those questions that I get every single semester. I assume this is because you want to talk about a life experience that you've had. When you talk about life experiences that you had, again, you can't use yourself as a source because you're implicitly biased. What you have to do is ask whether or take a look at information that corroborates. So I'll give you an example. I had a student who talked about, she was from Finland, I think. Finland or Denmark, somewhere in Scandinavia, and she had gone to visit either Thailand or Indonesia, and she liked it so much that she ended up staying. It was a very, very personal speech, and a lot of it was, these are the reasons why I ended up staying. I really like the people, I really like the country, I really like the landscape, whatever it might be. What you then do in situations like that is let's say you're talking about, the landscape of Indonesia, you take a look at a source that describes that landscape, and there's going to be plenty. Again, it doesn't have to be like a super specific thing. All I want to know is that you guys know how to cite and reference. That's really what this is for. So you find something that discusses, again, think about it in terms of contextualization. You're looking for something that contextualizes the thing that you're saying. So again, let's say that I spent a big part of my life growing up in the Middle East, okay? I would say, let's say that I wanted to describe how when I was a kid, a lot of places where I grew up were, they were just sort of starting to be constructed. A lot of it was deserts. A lot of it was still, and now it's a bustling metropolis. Right now there's construction cranes everywhere and skyscrapers everywhere. Okay, so what I would do then is find a reference that talks about growth, industrial growth in that country. All right, and that way you've contextualized, you've added more color to the story that you're trying to tell. All right, and you can think of speeches as a narrative structure. There's a communication paper that I read a while ago when I was doing my master's degree that talked about how everything, the way that humans communicate is purely through narrative. Always think about it in terms of narrative, and then how you can really flesh out that story and make it very colorful in the mind's eye of your audience. All right. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question, and I can get into it further if you want, Brendan. Moving on to the fourth category, but could I use you as a source if I was talking about the Middle East? It depends. It depends, guys. When I say sources, I mean academic sources, and there are. And next week's Blackboard content contains information that tells you sort of what I'm expecting from sources. If I had written a research paper, so my master's thesis is about the revolution in Egypt. All right. If you were talking about the revolution in Egypt, you could quote my paper. But if I just came up to you and I was like, hey, the revolution in Egypt wasn't really successful because it was decentralized and they didn't have a figure that they could rally around, you couldn't be like, well, my teacher Ramsey says so and so. It'd have to be from a peer-reviewed source. That's really what you're looking for is a peer-reviewed source when I say sources. Other sorts of sources that you can take a look at are news agencies. And again, because those have to adhere to a certain level of not academic rigor, but they have to uphold themselves to a certain standard. And you can get into the discussion of like how reliable news agencies are and blah, blah, blah. But that's something that you can interject into your own speech. I don't want to get too deep into citations now because we're going to talk about it a little bit more next week, and I've got more material that'll clarify it for you guys. But if you still don't understand, we'll talk about it later. Organizational pattern, this is something as well that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on right now because I have a whole lecture dedicated to it. But organizational structures based on the kind of speech that you're going to give. If you guys have ever watched a Quentin Tarantino movie, he likes to, in his older films, he likes to do this thing where he starts at the end. He'll show you the ending, and it'll be this very dramatic thing, and then he stops and he goes back to the beginning, and it sort of shows you slowly go with him on the journey of how you got to that ending. That's a style that's a little bit of a more complicated organizational style. What I was talking about before, about your 3 favorite flavors of ice cream, There's ways to organize it, whether it's nominal, meaning that there is no specific rank. These are just three things that I want to talk about that are related to each other thematically, but not ranked or anything like that. There is an ordinal structure, which says that, these are my three favorite colors, whatever it might be: black, orange, yellow. All right, black is my favorite color for this reason, orange my second favorite for this reason, yellow my third favorite for this reason. All right, that's an ordinal structure. There's a bunch of these. We'll talk about them later. If that organizational structure is clear, you get the points for that. Again, here we have transitions. I talked about transitions. If you're going between your points effectively, and I understand logically that now we've left point A and we've gone to point B, you get the points for that. Easy peasy. Transition into conclusion, same exact thing. In your conclusion, you've got the summary of points. Summary of points is the opposite of your preview of points, but essentially contains the same information. Let's say, let's say that I was sitting there on my phone the entire time and did not pay attention to your speech at all, and I just sort of looked up during the conclusion, and just in time for you to give me your summary, and you recapped your 3 points. These are the 3 reasons why the Beatles changed rock music, or the way that we listen to music today, X, Y, and Z. If I just looked up and paid attention to that, I would know what your speech is about. And then a definitive final statement, also called a clincher. This is the way that I tell it to my students usually is, this is the thought that you want to leave your audience with. Okay, if I leave the classroom, what can you say that will leave the content, the subject of your speech, lingering in my mind? Leave me, wanting to do further research on my own to look into this topic. That's how you keep conversations going. All right. Moving on to competency 5, appropriate language. So that first criteria there, bias-sensitive language. If you're worried about maybe is the conclusion of a speech the same as the summary of a point? No, the summary of points is included in the conclusion of your speech. So if you think about your speech as three main sections, it's your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Each of them has specific things that you need to include that allow them to be the thing that they are. So the introduction has to have a hook, has to have a thesis, has to have preview points for it to be your introduction. Otherwise, if you just go into if you go into a speech and you're like, so I'm going to talk about the Beatles, so I'm going to talk about recording techniques that the Beatles used. You've completely skipped past the introduction and gotten into your first main point. If you do things like that, you don't get points you'll lose a lot of points in the speech for skipping out on your introduction. So the conclusion contains a summary of your points, but the summary of your points is not the entirety of your conclusion. It's only one part of it. All right? I hope that was clear. All right. And let me know if it wasn't. Bias-sensitive language. So what I was saying, appropriate language. In your supplemental information packet, there's a guide to bias-sensitive language. I don't know how often it's updated. Last time it was when I looked at it, or when I looked at it the first time in 2016, it was pretty comprehensive. It was also, but I don't know if it's been updated since the Me Too movement and other big social shifts like that. If you're uncertain about the thing that you want to say, if you're talking about something that you think might be controversial, if you're talking about something, if I take a look at your outline and I think something that you're saying might be controversial, I need you to really please come to me, take a look at the supplemental information packet, or follow the instructions that I tell you to follow, because it's a very, if you use insensitive language, you're going to get dinged for that as a grade. If you're saying stuff that is construed that I construe as hate speech, again, I've never in 5 years of teaching, I've never once had to deal with this. And I really hope that I never have to. That becomes a different story, If you start dropping N-bombs and saying that, this is why the white man is superior, then obviously that goes beyond your grade, and that gets into disciplinary issues with the university and all of that sort of thing. Again, I've never had to deal with this in my life. I really hope that it's a situation that I really hope that I don't have any students that hold any extremist opinions like that. Um, but if something is just on the verge, or if you're not aware that something needs to be phrased a particular way, then I'll try to point you in the right direction, or I'll point you towards literature that'll sort of guide you. If it's something that I don't know a lot about, I'll try to point you in the direction of literature that will better inform you about that thing. Okay. Formality. I had a student once give their speech about slang and speaking informally. And for the parts where he had to reference informal language, he referenced it. He when he said the whatever sentence, I mean, he opened his speech with "What's going on, MFers," right? And that's totally fine. You can do that. But then when but he can't be like, "Yo, okay, so listen up. My speech is totally on fleek." I don't know if people still say on fleek, but you can't say stuff like that, okay? It still has to be structured in a way that's formal, and the reason for that, it has to be intelligible. If it's all just a bunch of slang, it becomes unintelligible. And that goes the same for jargon. I had a student who was studying genetics or cellular biology or something like that, and she took a lot of care to make sure that the entirety of the class, remember, this is a 100 level class, so not everybody is going to be is not going to be studying the same thing that you're studying, so you need to be conscientious of that and not use words or acronyms. And for military students, this happens a lot, where they'll start to use acronyms because they use them a lot in their daily life, but not everybody is going to be familiar with what is PCSing, for example. That's something that you have to explain. All right, and sometimes it might go beyond just saying what the words in the acronym are. Sometimes you have to actually explain, because even just saying what those words might not fully explain what that concept is. Remember, what you're trying to explain is a concept. All right. Speaker does not draw attention to themselves or to the occasion. You never want to do this. You never want to get up there and be like, if the speech is about your own personal experiences, then again, you reference it formally. You say, according to my experiences with blah, blah, blah. I don't dock people for using personal pronouns. So my, you, I won't dock you for that. But if I had a student once get up there and she was in the middle of her speech, and then she leaned back and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous." Never do that. Even if you are nervous, don't do that. You're never going to see, you're never going to see somebody like the president of the university get up and give his, state of the university, system speech, and then slump back on his podium and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous right now." You're never going to see anything like that. So just watch out for that sort of thing. Verbal fillers. In your day-to-day speech, it's very common for you to use verbal or vocalic fillers. These are words such as like, or vocalic fillers are words like where you're the thing is and it's very, again, it breaks formality. So you're gonna get docked points for formality there, and then at the same time, it really interrupts the flow of the thing that you're trying to say. If you'll notice, even though I use a lot of vocalic fillers in my day-to-day speech, what I don't do is stop myself because I need to think about the thing that I'm going to say next. I try to make it so that the ideas that I'm trying to convey are as seamless as possible, and that's just better for intellectual digestion by the person. They're going to remember more of what you said if you said it in a consistent, straightforward, and unbroken way. If you hemmed and hawed and edged and whatever a million different ways, it's going to be difficult for people to follow along with what you're saying. And especially for a speech, because this lecture that I'm giving you right now is prepared in the sense that I know the content that I want to deliver, but I didn't sit there for, a couple of days beforehand and be like, all right, then I'm going to talk about competency 5 and it's blah, blah, blah. It's a lecture is for the most part delivered off the cuff, because I'm experienced in the thing that I want to say. And so I'm comfortable saying it Sorry, I'm so off subject, but I can't find this rubric anywhere. Where can I find it? Martha, don't worry about it too much for now. You're going to be able to go back and... Again, I have a little 10-minute video that explains all of this stuff anyway, but the rubric is contained... If you go to our syllabus, there's a link there for the supplemental information packet. You scroll through the supplemental information packet. I'm not sure what page it's on. But it's also, oh, and let me stress, by the way, the rubric that you guys are going to have is not going to look like this. This is my edited version because, like I said at the beginning of the class, the rubric in the supplemental information packet is meant to be printed and handwritten on. I digitized this, so you'll be able to find it. There's even a section in your, and there is a table of contents in the supplemental information packet. That takes you to the competency breakdowns, and so if you just open that up, it has the competencies and all of their breakdowns, and you will at least be able to follow along with it that way. Although it should be, I believe it's in this week's Blackboard content folder. If not, it'll be in next week's Blackboard content folder. And again, don't worry about it too much because we're gonna get really familiar with this rubric over the course of the semester. But again, if all else fails, you can always go back and watch this lecture. And there's also a 10-minute video explaining all of this on the Blackboard content folder. Okay. Where are we at now? Okay, so I talked about verbal fillers enough. Vocal presentation. All right, perfect. All right, great, Martha. Perfect. Okay, so vocal presentation there, that's your 6th competency. This is one that I focus on a lot because I think it's really important. And I think, especially for students who say that they suffer a lot with speeches and with giving presentations, the vocal presentation is the part that you really want to work on. It's my favorite part to grade, and it's my favorite part to listen to in your speeches. And it's the place I think where a lot of people can do they can get really far very quickly by working on this particular thing. Obviously, no reading. You're not going to like hold up your speech in front of your face and read it and cover up your face. That's not a speech. That's you reading out loud, and I know that you can read out loud. Okay. The rate, if I was going really, really, really quickly and like I was explaining a lot of things and, I talked about the expressiveness, I talked about intensity and volume, I talked about all the competencies, so let's just move on. I'm not doing anybody any favors, all right? And same thing especially if you're in my day-to-day life, my dad always yells at me about being he'll always be like, yo, slow down. Or he used to more when I was a kid, but he'd be like, slow down, all right? Similarly, because also if you're speaking very, very quickly, you might not meet your time requirements. Similarly, and this is the more common one, if you're speaking very, very slowly, you might really exceed your time limits. So remember, you want to be within that 4 to 6 minute sweet spot. You want to be as close to 5 minutes as possible. And the reason for that, by the way, is because there's value in being a succinct speaker. There's value in being able to articulate yourself and being able to write down content in a way that meets a time requirement, because it shows that if you need to write less or if you need to write more, you have those skills to be like, all right, this is what I need to edit, this is what I need to add on to, all right? Expressiveness, changes in pitch, all right? You should not imagine if I was this is already a long lecture. Let's say that I was sitting here like this and I was delivering the lecture like this. There would be no expressiveness or change in pitch. Vocal tone was dynamic and relevant to the mood of the speech. No monotone. The speaker could clearly be heard throughout the entire room. That would be awful, all right? So you don't want to do things like that. You want to be dynamic and you want to be expressive. And intensity and volume, especially, this matters more inside the classroom. But if you're recording yourself on your own recording device that you can play back and hear that the volume is too quiet and then upload that recording to me anyway, don't do that, all right? Make sure that you're clearly intelligible, because that's a silly point to lose, in a class where we're recording our speeches, okay? Moving on to pronunciation, grammar. I'm not going to harp on you about things like subject-object differentiation, even though you should know that stuff. But I'm not going to harp on you, if you don't use the subjunctive mood where you use, was instead of were, where if you said, the subjunctive mood is something like if I said, if I was to dock you grades, it should actually be if I were to dock you grades. I'm not going to dock you grades for things like that. Again, a little bit like advanced layer grammatical concepts, I'm not going to dock you points for, but you don't run into grammatical mistakes too often. I can't even really come up with an example right now. Using was instead of is, using incorrect tenses and things like that is something that you might get docked for, or run-on thoughts or something like that, perhaps, but it's not an issue that I run into often. Articulation, again, this gets into speaking too quickly. If you're speaking very, very quickly, then obviously you're not articulating yourself. I have a tendency to really try to over-articulate myself to the point where people might find it infuriating, perhaps, I don't know. But I think it's important, especially as a teacher, because you want people to understand the brunt of what you're saying. Delivery, speaker maintained a consistent delivery. Again, you're in the Goldilocks zone. You weren't speaking too fast. You weren't speaking too slow. You weren't halting your speech all the time by umming and ahhing. All right. And again, that next the next one there is no vocalic fillers. Again, like I said, a lot of these criteria feed into each other. If you're using vocalic fillers, then that's going to be interrupting your delivery. Try not to do that. A speech is a prepared thing. So when you come in to deliver your speech, it's 5 minutes of your own practice speech. I promise you, by the way, even practicing your speech like 2 or 3 times, once isn't really enough. I would say that you need to practice it a minimum of twice, up to 4, maybe 5 times. I don't know if I'd practice it more than that, because then you might be like driving yourself nuts with obsession. But if that's something that you want to, or if that's the way that you work, then by all means go for it. I definitely practice the speech before you deliver it at least more than once. That's not to say you can record it and then re-record it if that's something that you want to do. But for you to be familiar and to give me a consistent delivery and like a good delivery, you're going to have to practice it, because even if you write the speech, you're not going to be familiar with it. You're not going to be familiar with delivering it until you practice that a couple of times. Okay? And then finally, nonverbal support, eye contact. You don't have to, if you notice, I don't like full on like eagle eye, stare at you at the screen. And that's obviously because there's no audience for me to look at, and it's odd. Even in class, I always tell people, so in class, people have a tendency to look straight at the teacher, and and I get that I'm your teacher, but it's still unnerving when you maintain eye contact with anybody for too long. So you don't want to do that. That's something that's a little bit difficult to practice in context of an online environment. That is why I encourage you, if you live with your family, or if you live with your friends, or if you're bubbling, that is to say, like, you're only hanging out with 1 other or 2 other people who you're the only people you guys see. It's that concept that they're doing a lot of, I think, in the UK or whatever, so that people are not so isolated when they're sheltering in place during COVID. But if you have a system like that where you can have an audience, if you want to record your speech in front of an audience, that's great, and that'll teach you how to do things like eye contact. If you notice, the way that I do my deliveries, I think, is that my eyes are at least expressive and dynamic, so that you don't know that, I'm not just looking up into the corner and trying to remember what I want to say. I think my entire all my physicality is directed towards being inviting and being open and really engaging my audience in the subject matter that I'm trying to deliver. Same thing with gestures and facial expressions. I'm not like, wow, look at this speech that I've given. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be, if that's what your speech is, if that's the mood of your speech, then that's fine. But again, you just sort of want to live in this place where you're warm and inviting, or if you're telling people about, if you're telling people about, the horrors of some atrocity that was committed, then if you want to like really lock in eye contact and really make people feel the gravity of what you're saying, again, that's up to you. And that's something that comes with experience and understanding the mood that you're trying to convey based on the content of your speech. Note cards, you can use note cards, just don't be reading off your note cards is really the only thing, and don't have them like stuck in front of your face. And then appearance, if you see I'm wearing a button down, you don't have to wear a button down. Anything with a collar is fine when you give your speeches. If you give me your speech in pajamas, I'm giving you a 0. I'm not actually going to give you a 0, but I'm going to dock you points for appearance. I'm going to dock you points for preparedness. And this is something, Alaskans, I'm looking at you. I don't know why. I've had students come into my classroom wearing fuzzy slippers before. This dude, it was the dead of winter. This dude wore boots to come into the class, then took off his boots and put on fuzzy slippers. Don't do that, all right? Don't be wearing your PJs. Don't do anything like that. It's, especially if you're at home, it's so easy to just throw on a collar. If you're in the military, if you want to wear your uniform, that's totally fine. I don't know what the ins and outs of that are, but if it's something that has a collar on it, then I could care less, all right? If it's something that has a collar on it, but has the F-bomb like blasted across the front, obviously that's also not formal. Use your brain, all right? So that's it for the rubric there. If anybody's got any questions, let me know. I'm gonna flip over to the old big screen webcam there for a sec while I prepare the next thing that I want to show you. Close that out. I said we were going to look at grade conversions. Okay. Not necessarily have 3 of those. All right. Desktop. Okay. All right. Oh, that is awfully small. Here, let me just make sure that is properly visible. Okay, yeah, that looks good. All right, okay, good. Okay, and this is something, and the grade conversion is also something that you can find in your supplemental information packet. It looks exactly like this. I just copied this directly off the supplemental information packet. We in this class we use this rubric for all of our presentations. The problem is that here, hang on, okay, good. Actually, okay, all right, okay. You guys can still hear me. All right, so we have presentations that are weighted differently. Our first couple of speeches, the informative and the visual aid, are worth 100 points. Then you get into your fishbowl, worth 150, symposium, worth 200. They're all graded based on this 40-point grading system. So the thing is that all of these, so like 8 points is a 60, like 8 out of 40, okay, is a 60 on a 100-point presentation. It's a 90 on a 150-point presentation and 120 on a 200-point presentation. However, all of those grades equal a D-, all right? Then once you've gotten a 10 out of 40, then you get into a D. 14 is a D+. Again, if you get a 20 out of 40, all right, you're in the C range. It's a 75, all right? That's 75 on the 100-point scale, 113, 150 on the 150 and 200-point scales respectively, all right? Again, you're within the mid-C range. Please, if you're watching this, if you get a 25 or if you get a 30, like a 30 out of 40 is a really good grade. A 30 out of 40 is a B+, all right? It's an 88, all right? So I don't want anybody to come to me and be like, oh, why did I get a 30 out of 40? 75, that seems kind of low for how good my speech was. It happens every semester. Please pay attention to the words that I'm saying right now. Look up the conversions before you come and talk to me, okay? All your other grades in this class, by the way, are pass-fail. The only things that are great, like if you show up to activities and you do them within the criteria that I asked for, you get full points. If you're missing criteria, so we're going to talk about the monologue activity in a sec. If your monologue is 30 seconds long when it should have been 1 to 2 minutes long, or whatever the time limit that I have for you guys there is, then you're not going to get the points for it. With the activities, if you meet the criteria, then you get the points for it, full points, okay? The only things that are graded on a variable scale are the speeches. So when you get a speech grade back from me, look up the grade conversions. Every other grade that you're going to get is either going to be like 30 points out of 30 points for each activity, or 0 out of 30 points for not completing the activity properly. I don't care what if your monologue, if I hate if you picked something from the Traveling Sisterhood of the Yaya Pants, all right, which is a terrible movie. I'm just kidding. It's a great movie. And it's called The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and it's fantastic. And if you hate it, we're going to have words, all right? But even if however I might feel about the material that you're delivering, it doesn't matter. You meet the criteria, you're going to get the full points. The only thing graded on a scale like this are your speeches and presentations. All right? So bear that in mind. All right. And now let's move back here to the old webcam view. All right. Da-da-da-da. And then let's open up the last thing, the monologue activity. Okay. And there you go. All right. So this is the final thing that I want to talk to you guys about. The monologue activity, this is due this week on Sunday. This is something that honestly just should be really fun. I like to hear, one semester I had somebody pick the onion scene, an ogre is like an onion scene from Shrek, and he actually had, I think it was a conversation between Shrek and Donkey, and he had all of Eddie Murphy's parts like programmed on his phone, and so he just came with his phone and a little Bluetooth speaker, and he did the Shrek parts, and then he played the responses in that scene. It's not really a monologue. I mean, that becomes a dialogue, but I mean, just the phrase monologue activity is just really a title. You can do a dialogue if you want to between you and yourself. That's fine. Really, the purpose of this activity is to make you more comfortable with delivering. And if you're delivering something that you've seen an actor do or a poet do, or a musician, whatever it might be, it should give you more of an idea of like what space you want to fill in with that particular piece of media. And it'll give you an idea of how to like sort of bridge that into your own speeches. So the monologue activity really is a presentation comfort activity. So you pick a scene from a TV show. Whenever we do this activity, I always pick a scene from the show Futurama. But you can do whatever TV show you want. Don't make it overly filthy. Again, I don't really care if you curse. Don't make it overly filthy. Don't make it something stupid like the intro to your favorite porn film. Don't do anything like that. Please don't do stuff like that. It's really, just don't make it overly filthy. That's really all I care about, okay? You can do a scene from a film if you want. Shrek is always a popular one. I had one semester 2 students do different scenes from The Princess Bride, things like that. Scene from a play, excerpt from a book, poem, song lyrics, anything that I might not have thought of. Okay, so select a piece which will give you anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes of material. Again, please live within that. I have to watch over 100 of these. Please, I don't want anything that is. I don't think that is going to be 10 minutes long. For this particular activity, I'm not going to dock you points if it's longer. I'm only going to dock you points if it's. If it's under a minute. If it's longer than 3 minutes, I'm not going to watch past the 3-minute mark, but I'm not going to dock you points if it's longer than the 3-minute mark. And just same thing that you would do for your speeches. Record yourself, upload it to our Google Drive folder. Again, super easy. Okay. The requirements of the activity, and again, this file is located. You can find it in Blackboard. You need to be logged into your Alaska EDU in your Gmail in order to be able to access this, because it's a Google Doc. It's my Google Doc that I've linked you guys. Once you've picked out a piece, you'll have to deliver it. Deliver it, even if you rely on watching the actor. If you do Marlon Brando's monologue from Heart of Darkness, okay, that's fine. You can deliver it exactly the way that Marlon Brando delivered that line. That's totally fine with me. All right. If you're getting into the space, if you're getting into the mood of that piece, that is all I care about. If you're uncomfortable in performance, I want to break you out of that discomfort is really the purpose of this activity. For this one, you can totally read off a paper. If you want to memorize it, then that is fantastic. But if you want to read off a paper, that is totally fine with me. Tips, it's probably better if you do a monologue instead of a dialogue, but you can do a dialogue if you want to. Practice delivering it a couple of times. Again, you really want to get into the space of that piece, and practice is generally better than not practice. And if you've got any questions, shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to respond to you. If you've got questions that are for me specifically, don't post them in the student forum on Blackboard discussions. I don't check those consistently. I don't check those often. I more check the actual folders, like the actual weekly content discussions, than anything like that. No, Anton. Yeah. So when you turn it into Google Drive, it's only you can see who is able to look at the contents of that folder. I think if you right-click it, there's a way to check who are the people with privileges, with access privileges. It's just the only people. So if you're student X and you shared a folder with me, only student X and me can see the contents of that folder. The entire class, you will never submit something into a folder that I will share with the rest of the class unless you ask me to, or unless I send you a written request with. The first thing that I'll do, if I think that you've done something that's really, really, really good, and I would like the opportunity to share it with others as an example, as an exemplar for them, for other people to benefit from how good of a job you did, and I think that it's very instructive, the first thing I'll do is I'll email you from my Alaska EDU email, not from my Gmail, not from anywhere else. I will email you from rabugallium@alaska.edu, and I will be like, hey, Anton, this thing that you did was really, really, really good. Would you mind if I shared it with future students? If you say, yes, I do mind, that's the end of the discussion. If you say, no, I don't mind, then I'll send you this little piece of paper to fill out that removes your FERPA hold from that particular assignment, and that way I'll be able to share it with people. Otherwise, I can get into trouble with the university if I share that content. This is not just for me, by the way. This is for any of your professors. We're not allowed to share your grades, and we're not allowed to share your assignments with other people, okay? At least with any kind of identifiable information. So things with your face, things with your voice, we can never share. Things with your name on it, we can't share that in any identifiable way, all right? But yeah, if you guys have any questions about this stuff, please shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to assist you. Please get done what we need to get done for Blackboard. Read the material that I posted for you, complete the monologue activity, and upload it, and download the outline that I shared with you guys, and start thinking about, you don't have to upload the outline this week. The outline will be due not this upcoming Sunday, but the Sunday after that. Don't worry about it. Only worry about the things that I have written for you that are due this Sunday in the Blackboard content folder. But if you want to download the outline and take a look at it, think of a topic, because the discussion requires you to talk about the topic that you've chosen, yeah, just download it, think about the topic that you want to do. Start filling it out preliminarily if that's something that you feel like you want to do or that you're capable of doing, then that's totally fine with me. But you're not going to have to submit it next week. And week 3's content folder, you will see in the assignments due Sunday section at the bottom of the content folder, you will see that you'll have to submit your outline to me. So the only things that are due this week are the monologue, the discussion, and then whatever else I have with you that I posted there, reading the content and picking out a speech topic. If you haven't shared a Google Drive folder with me yet, I think I've been getting a few stragglers here and there, but for the most part, I think everybody's shared stuff with me. If you haven't shared a folder with me, please do so. And otherwise, that's it.